Indeed, we are back. Welcome to the all-new Megane RS. And conveniently, as is the way with car launches, I find myself on a undulating, twisty-turny mountain road in Spain, just outside Jerez. Man, this morning we had a transfer flight and we landed in Paris and it was snowing. So to be here in this plus 17 degrees, beautiful countryside, in this wonderful new car, but nothing but smile and glee in the bones. Now then, what are we in? So this is it. Let me start with a little bit of history. Don't tune out. I just think it's important to set a little context, mostly because of the track record of this wonderful brand that is Renault and their RS division. So days of old, when I was growing up, when Renault brought out a new hot hatch, it was a thing of wonder. And one of my sort of outstanding memories of Renaults and hot hatches is the not so late Megane R26R. Now that car was fully stripped out, roll cage, sticky tyres, fixed bucket seats, and even though I'd driven plenty of other hot hatches, this road, even though I'd driven plenty of other hot hatches up until that point, there was something about the R26R that really resonated with me, particularly its steering feel. Now, we're in a day and age where things are evolving toward efficiency, and manufacturers, bless them, have got all kinds of directives to meet from the EU and God knows what. But still, they managed to find loopholes that make cars like this still fantastic to drive and aspire to. Speaking of EU directives, we're in a 1.8 litre, 4-cylinder turbocharged engine. However, due to the marvels of engineering, this is now pushing out 276 brake horsepower. Now, don't get me wrong, in this day and age we throw figures like that around, but it's the way that this thing applies it to the floor, and predominantly the dynamics of the chassis and handling that manage to carry the momentum of what that 276 brake horsepower provides through these phenomenal driving roads. But we'll get onto that shortly. So, back to the engine, let's talk about the characteristics of it. Now, for me, hot hatches of days gone by have always been about grabbing them by the scruff of their neck and wringing them out to their very last RPM until it feels like they're going to throw a rod. Well, that isn't quite the case in turbocharged cars in this market, because the majority of the reason we're going turbocharged is actually for efficiency. However, the benefits of that are there's loads of torque. I would say there's actually two driving styles that this car is available in. I say that because you can get it in a manual 6-speed and you can get it in a dual clutch 6-speed, which we are driving right now. Manual video coming soon. I'm going to be driving that on track tomorrow. So until then, I can't really give you too much of a subjective review on both of them. However, hot hatches for me, as I mentioned, grabbing it by the scruff of its neck, and while this dual clutch gearbox is seamless, it's super smooth, I can't help but think the character of it would lend itself more to having a manual gearbox. It's just that extra level of engagement that I think this car would benefit from, because it isn't a ballistic supercar. It's not designed to be that. It's designed to give you many miles per gallon at the fantastic price point of around £30,000. The interesting thing is, this 1.8 litre engine seems to run out of torque at around about 3/4 of its overall rev range. And what that has the effect of is you short shifting, because if you rev it out all the way, you'll find that actually you're not really using any of that twisting, pulling power. You're just using the revs for rev's sake. And no disrespect to this engine, but it seems that gone are the days of revving out an engine to get the audible delight out of them. In this car, it's all about that torque band, and you find yourself effectively short shifting. Now in this, because it's the dual clutch, I actually quite like that, because it gives you another level, just a slight degree more of engagement, because you're just having to shift a bit sooner than you might originally expect. That suits it. How it would be with a manual, we'll find out tomorrow. Speaking of paddles, now I don't want to go into the frustrations of this car so early, but we are on the topic of transmissions and interacting with them. There's something odd. There's something odd happening here. Now, you know, this is a company, Renault Sport, These guys race in Formula One, and in the past they've nailed driver experience in their previous hot hatches. But I'm not sure if you've noticed where the paddles are. This might be splitting hairs, this might just be a personal opinion, I don't know. But you see these little thumb grooves here. That's where your hands sit, and as a result, that's where your fingers sit, and that is mostly where you're going to be catching those paddles the majority of the time when you want to upshift. Now, when you're driving in a straight line, kind of no problem at all, but as soon as you've got a degree of lock on the steering, the fact that these paddles are mounted so far up the steering column, they're so short, oftentimes I've been pulling where this interactive device is here. So this here is the volume control paddle. That is how far the paddles should be extended if you're going to fix your paddles to the steering column. If they're going to move with the wheel, it doesn't matter. But when you're crossed up and you want to hit one more gear up or down, you want to have a really big paddle to get your hands around. And for me, these just sit a little bit high and a little bit small. This is another reason for me why I think this car would benefit from a manual gearbox. Anyway, manual's coming tomorrow. So something particularly unique to this car from Renault is the application of four-wheel steer. Yes, the rear wheels assist the front rotation by turning in opposite directions or the same direction depending on the speed you're going. Interestingly, an entirely new application of four-wheel steer that Renault has applied to this car is that even at higher speeds, over 60 kilometers an hour, the rear wheels turn in the same direction by 1 degree as the front wheels. What that does is give a virtual elongation of the chassis, which makes it at higher speeds a more stable car. Why I say it's unique is because most cars that offer rear wheel steering don't keep on activating at higher speeds. You get them on supercars, but rear wheel steering has often been complementary. Actually, when you're going slower, they turn in slightly the opposite direction to the front wheel, so when you're in town and going around tight corners, it virtually shrinks the wheelbase. But this has been applied for the opposite reason. It's been applied for performance and stability. Threading it down these roads, it just eggs you on. It just keeps on going. I think the flow of this is what makes up for what we would perceive these days as not monumental power. But where this thing really complements that is how it carries that momentum through these fantastic roads, because it's just so stable. The chassis is beautiful, and I think it's just very confidence and inspiring. Now, I was going on earlier about how the R26R for me was probably one of my favorite cars that ever came out of Renault. What was great about that was the steering feel. Now, I don't think they've quite nailed it with this. I wouldn't go so far as to say it was hollow, but there's something there which isn't quite as engaging and connecting as some of the RS products of old. However, you put it into race mode and this thing comes alive. And this is the wonder of technology right now. Literally at the flick of a button, the response of the shifts is crisp. It has that subtle slamming home. The valves and the exhaust open up, and we've got some subtle cracks and pops on the overrun. And of course, it sounds much better. And when you slam that gear home, there's also this reassuring pop that just lets you know that you're in something a little bit spicy. And I love that. And that's the breadth of ability that you're getting with hot hatches these days. And now the stability control is somewhat augmented and it allows you to play around and flow with this car and just let it dance and slide around the tarmac just a little bit, particularly along. And I know this sounds daft, but I like it on the sort of uneven, bumpy tarmac where the thing can actually skip and move about. Every now and again on these roads, sometimes you've got perfectly glass smooth tarmac, and then other times you've got older, slightly broken roads. Every now and again you'll get this sort of slight crest and hump and crack, and this thing just skips and dances over it, and it becomes playful in your hands, literally with the flick of a button. It's mad. And when you pitch it in like this, there's no driver aids there anymore. It's you and you're sliding and having a good time. And that's what hot hatches are all about. The gearbox as well has become nice and snappy now. It's crisp and responsive. Oh, and this is where you've really got to make up your mind. Manual or dual clutch, of course, one of the big things with any car, with any sort of orientation towards driving performance, is the driving position and the driving environment itself. Super happy that the adjustability and overall default sitting position of the seat is really good. Alcantara in the right place this time, straight in the middle. Loads of adjustability in the steering column. A big tick in my box is the fact there's also a lot of extension on the column, which I often find in a lot of cars, for whatever reason, they miss that trick, and steering columns seem to fall like just an inch too short. I know that doesn't sound much, but when you're trying to perfect your exact seating position, those little details make all the difference, and they've nailed it with this, certainly for the way I drive. And here we are, back to Jerez. Be sure to subscribe. We've got some awesome track time lined up tomorrow. We're in the manual. We're going to be able to compare these cars and see which one's best. I'm just super excited after that race mode to be able to do it yourself. Rev matching, heel and toe, in race mode, pops and bangs, smiles per gallon, through the roof. As always, thanks for watching, guys, and I shall see you next time. Ciao.